Chief, why don't we start off with how is the feeling now, I guess, with you and your team, the fact that the case has come to an end, plea agreement's done, and now the Bryan Kohberger's in prison for life.
Yeah, it's still a bit surreal. It's starting to sink in slowly that we've kind of come to the end of this conclusion, and for some, obviously, it's never going to end. The families involved in this and the loss of their loved ones will never go away. But we are excited that the outcome is finished and that he is being held accountable for his crimes.
What type of, I guess, toll does this take on a smaller department? A case like this, I mean, what type of resources and manpower does it take to have suddenly this massive case that not only is it big for your community and the families, but the whole world is watching?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we are a relatively small agency. It's all hands on deck when a major event like this happens. And of course, as we've explained to everyone, we couldn't have done it without our partners in the FBI, the Idaho State Police, Pennsylvania State Police, and all the personnel that came to our aid to help us through that investigation. It was truly a team effort, and it was a wonderful thing to be a part of is in that regard.
What would you say has been kind of the biggest thing you've learned during this case?
The biggest thing are you talking about specifically the investigation
Yeah,
or
about with the investigation.
um I guess from an agency standpoint, when we're talking about lessons learned, one area that we were a bit deficient was our preparation for our communications with the media and the public. We, again, small agency, smaller town, didn't expect this to ever happen here, but then for it to turn into an international event in the media was completely off our radar. So we were ill equipped for preparing and being able to handle that right out the gate. And again, we relied heavily on our partners who came to our aid in that regard as well and helped us to get that under control and move forward. It was a big lesson learned there.
That Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, your predecessor retired a few years ago, right after this case broke, right?
Chief Fry retired. Let's see, it would have been April of 24.
Oh,
I was,
okay.
yep.
And what were you doing before that? Were you with the department?
Yes, I was at the time of this event, I was the captain over our services division.
Okay. And did you always want to be a police chief? Is this something that you had aspired to, or is it something that you've thought, oh, I'll put my name in, or did they ask you to do it, the city?
Yeah, throughout my career, from day one, I've never aspired that someday I will be a chief. I never had that kind of a mindset. It's just throughout my career, opportunities came available, and I felt that I could be more impactful and help my agency and help my community better in different areas. And so when this opportunity came around, I thought to myself the very same thing I've asked myself every time I promoted is this the right time for me? Am I the right person for the job? Do I feel like I can be impactful? Can I make a difference? Can I make improvements where I feel they need to be made? And the answers were yes to many of those questions. And so I was approached by our city mayor about my potential for the position, and I accepted his appointment. And luckily, the city council also agreed with him, and that's how I got in the position I am now.
Were you at all a little apprehensive or nervous knowing that this was such a big case that you're now the leader of the department as this is getting ready to go to trial?
Absolutely. Not only that, but just being the leader of an agency is quite a daunting task. And I was wondering whether or not I was completely ready for it. But, I think what assisted me in that way was the fact that I was a part of the command staff during this incident. I was heavily involved from day one throughout the investigation and helping Chief Fry push the agency through and lead through this incident. So I felt like that did give me some experience to prepare me for the future.
Chief, do you remember the day that you guys got the call? Like, were you working that day? Can you kind of walk me through what your initial involvement was with when this whole case broke?
Yeah, it was a Sunday. I was at home. I was actually sitting on my couch watching a little television. I was preparing to leave within an hour or so to go to a friend's birthday celebration, and my phone rang. I saw it was work, and of course, when you're a command staff and you get a phone call on the weekend, it's usually not something great. But never expected to hear on the other end of the line what I heard, that we had not only had a homicide, but it was a quadruple homicide. And my initial reaction was one of a bit of disbelief. And but when a call comes in like that, we just get ready and we go in. And like I said, small agency like us, it was every hand on deck. And so I changed my clothes and went right to the scene.
Wow. And you've been working on it every day since.
Yep.
So when those initial days of the investigation, you're obviously gathering evidence, trying to figure out what happened. What was the feeling like, the fact that you didn't have a suspect right away, that you couldn't get the suspect and that it wasn't known it wasn't an obvious answer as to who did this?
Sure. I mean, obviously that adds a layer of difficulty. Luckily, here in our area, we have a very low violent crime rate. I mean, we've had homicides in the past, but they are more or less few and far between. And in the last few that I've been involved with prior to this case, we were able to identify a suspect immediately and knew where the direction that we were going. So certainly, this one was a bit different because it was at the onset a whodunit. And we were starting from literally ground zero and working our way through the investigation. So it definitely added a layer of complexity that we hadn't had.
I would imagine the other complex thing is when tips start pouring in. I'm sure the majority of them mean to be helpful, but they might not be. But then you also get ones that are completely far out there from different people. How do you as an agency sort through all those to find the valid ones versus the ones that you don't need to spend any time on?
Yeah, so our procedure for the tips that came in during this incident, again, leaning on our partners at the FBI, utilizing some of their strategies on that and their analysts. So we would receive those tips. They would come in, they would be parsed out to different investigators to then scroll through them and look at the legitimacy or potential legitimacy of them. Because as you said, some of them were quite far out there and something that maybe didn't need follow up. But that was part of the process, looking at which ones that we needed to prioritize, which ones we needed to act upon immediately, which ones we could maybe wait a little while. And then each one of those were divvied out to a different investigator to do follow up on, whether that's an interview or looking at getting some data or whatnot, and just processing each one as they came through that way.
Do you remember where you were when you learned that you guys might have a suspect and he's in Pennsylvania?
Yes, I will remember that day for a very long time. I was here working at the police department, and my role during the investigation was primarily in communications. The second day of this incident, the prior chief delegated me as the public information officer, so I took that role on as a primary, in addition to my other duties as the services commander. But we worked very closely with the investigators, certainly on the status of the case. And so when we learned that we had a potential suspect, it was exciting.
I bet. And then when you find out how they got him, as far as tying it to the case, what was your thought knowing that, the DNA tracing him to the garbage can and all that, that maybe, 15, 20 years ago, that technology may not have been able to do that, even sooner than that, actually.
Yeah, it actually was a huge piece of evidence, certainly in this case. Our investigators have continually said that we believe even if we didn't have that DNA evidence, that we were on the right track and we would have eventually found him either way. However, that certainly was a gigantic piece of evidence that led us to him quickly, or much more quickly than the other potential routes. So it was wonderful to have that. When we learned that we had all those puzzle pieces coming together, one of the last pieces of the puzzle was the DNA match. It just all started to make sense. And so it really picked up steam and we moved forward very quickly.
Do you believe that there might be still more evidence out there that hasn't been found or will never be found?
Well, certainly. I mean, this case, we never found the weapon that was utilized, the knife that was utilized. So that is somewhere in existence, and I don't know if we'll ever find it. Certainly, if we get any kind of information where we could follow up and try to find that item, we would love to do that. But other than that, yeah, I don't know if we're going to have much else to go on.
Do you think there may have been another knife too?
All the evidence showed from the investigation that we were dealing with one singular knife.
Okay, one singular weapon.
Mhm.
When you learned that he wanted to do a plea agreement, what was your thought at that moment?
Yeah, just in my experience in law enforcement, I always know that that is a possibility in any case, those things to come up. In this particular case, as we got closer and closer to trial, that the idea of that happening was beginning to fade in my mind. But when I heard that that was on the table and that things were progressing in that way, you know, it's especially the way that it ended. Correct. I mean, he pled guilty to all charged counts. There was no bargaining. There was no. The only thing that was taken off the table was the death penalty. And quite frankly, as Prosecutor Bill Thompson has said, in a way, he still got the death penalty because now he will spend the rest of his life and he will die in prison. And so, as far as an outcome goes, I was very much in support of it.
And the fact that it doesn't drag on through decades of appeals, I imagine too, is kind of appealing in a way.
Certainly, because we all understand that that is the typical route that even death penalty cases go. Is it can be decades, if not the rest of their natural life, in appeals anyway. And so it could be mistrials, there could be additional trials. That means that all of the work has to be done multiple times. So yes, this is definitely an outcome that I was okay with.
Chief, this is kind of a broad question, but what how's the community doing? I mean, from 3, 4 years ago to today.
Well, I mean, this is a scar that'll never heal. It'll be a part of our history forever. I don't think it'll define us by any means, but it definitely hit home. We are a smaller town. We're a smaller agency. We're a pretty tight knit community, and all in all, I think it did. It unified us and it made us stronger. Throughout this investigation, I've said it before that the support from the community was amazing. While the greater world was maybe not looking on us in the most favorable light, our community here in Moscow had our backs and they were supportive and they were giving us phone calls and letters and endless streams of food to the police department that all of our investigators were able to just go downstairs and there was always food in our break room. They could grab a bite to eat and get right back to work. It very much lifted our spirits and helped us keep moving forward. So my hope is now that this is relatively over, that we can all begin to heal a little bit and just continue to move on. But we'll always remember it.
For other police agencies that are about your size, smaller agencies that might be somewhere in the world, if something like this, heaven forbid, hopefully it doesn't, happens to them though, what advice would you give to that chief? If, they get thrown in a big story, a big case, what would you tell him or her?
Yeah, my advice would be to cast that net for assistance far and wide, right out the gate. Don't wait. It is much easier to have all the resources come in and begin working on things and then start parsing those down or paring those down as needed versus trying to ask for aid the further that you get along. So cast that net for aid wide and far initially.